AITA for cutting contact after my ex said I was cruel for not protecting his reputation after cheating. I trusted my partner enough not to monitor his phone, his email, or his schedule. That trust started unraveling the moment a package showed up while he was out, and he responded like it was something dangerous. I'm 30F. My partner, Nolan, 32M, and I were together for a little over 3 years. It wasn't dramatic or performative. We didn't post each other constantly. We didn't fight loudly. We had routines, groceries, shared bills, separate friend circles, different work schedules. We trusted each other enough not to micromanage each other's lives. Or at least I did. The first thing that broke that illusion wasn't a text or a lipstick stain or a confession. It was a package. A medium-sized box showed up addressed to Nolan, with our shared phone number printed under his name. I was home. He wasn't. I didn't touch it beyond moving it inside. I texted him that something arrived. He responded immediately. No thanks. No cool. Just, what does it look like? That alone was strange. He usually forgot things he ordered. I described the box. He told me not to open it and said he'd handle it when he got home. The wording was clipped. Defensive. Not like him. About an hour later, a second package arrived. Different courier. Same name. Different sender. This one had torn tape on the label, just enough to expose a return name I didn't recognize. Not a company. A person. I stacked both boxes by the door and went back to what I was doing. I didn't open them. I didn't Google the name. I just waited. When Nolan got home, he didn't greet me, didn't ask how my day was. He walked straight to the door, grabbed both boxes like they were dangerous, and shoved them into the closet. I asked what they were. He said, work stuff. I laughed because that was lazy and he knew it. I asked why work stuff came in decorative packaging with handwritten tags taped to the sides. His voice snapped instantly. Why are you interrogating me? That word stuck. Interrogating. As if I were some outsider demanding answers instead of the person who shared a life with him. 2 days later, I received an email that wasn't meant for me. It wasn't forwarded. It wasn't sent accidentally. It was auto-generated because months earlier Nolan had added my email as a recovery contact and forgot to remove it. The subject line made my stomach go cold. It was a booking confirmation for a couple's retreat. 2 names, his and someone else's. I sat there rereading it until my head felt hollow. This wasn't flirting. This wasn't emotional cheating in the abstract. This was scheduling time away with someone else. Planning. That night, I asked him who she was. He went silent, not confused, not shocked, silent. Then he got angry. He accused me of monitoring his email. I told him I didn't even know about the recovery setting. He said that didn't matter. He said intention mattered more than outcome, and that my intention was to invade his privacy. I asked how long it had been going on. He said, that's not relevant. Something in me snapped then. I laughed, sharp and involuntary, because the confidence it took to say that out loud was staggering. I told him to leave for the night. He said no. He said I didn't get to throw him out over misinterpreted logistics, so I packed a bag and left instead. That's when the outside noise started. His friend messaged me saying I was heartless for walking out without letting Nolan explain his side. I replied that if his side required secrecy, aliases, and double bookings, it didn't need explaining. He called me dramatic. Nolan's sister sent me a long message on Instagram accusing me of weaponizing timing and travel against someone I claimed to love. I told her that her brother weaponized deception first and that I wasn't interested in being gaslit by his family PR team. She replied that I was cruel and cold. I told her cruelty is planning a future with 2 people and expecting applause for it. On WhatsApp, Nolan started sending voice notes instead of texts, his tone oscillating between wounded and furious. He said I blindsided him. He said I humiliated him by leaving. He said I didn't give him a chance to contextualize. I finally yelled back over a call when he accused me of abandonment. I told him abandonment is disappearing emotionally while physically present. I told him he didn't lose me suddenly. He lost control of the narrative and couldn't stand it. He shouted that I was overreacting. I shouted that he was under-accountable. He called me paranoid. I called him a coward hiding behind semantics. The call ended with him saying I was throwing away something real for something imagined. I laughed again and hung up. Then his friends escalated. A message on Facebook from someone I barely knew calling me unstable. I replied that instability is running 2 parallel lives and expecting them never to collide. They blocked me. Someone else commented on an old photo implying I was always difficult. I responded publicly that difficulty is often just resistance to being lied to. The comment disappeared. Now Nolan keeps insisting this could have been resolved if I'd stayed, if I'd listened, if I'd let him frame it properly. He says ending things like this proves I never valued what we had. I haven't responded to the last message yet. Update 1. 2 days after I left, Nolan messaged me like we were still operating on the same routine. No acknowledgement of what happened. No reference to the argument. No apology. Just a casual line asking if I could grab his jacket because the weather weather changed and he might need it later. That was it. That was the message. No, are you okay? No, can we talk? Just logistics. Like I'd stepped out for groceries and not walked away from a relationship that had cracked open. I replied that I wasn't his assistant. He called immediately. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask where I was staying. He didn't ask if we were broken up. He opened with, "Why are you being hostile?" I said, "Because you're acting like nothing happened." He snapped back that I was making a private issue public by not coming back and by staying with friends instead of handling things like an adult. He said people were starting to ask questions and that I was embarrassing him. That set the tone. I told him the issue stopped being private the second he booked romantic trips with someone else and forgot to remove my email from his backup settings. He raised his voice immediately, said I was obsessed with one email and ignoring the bigger picture. I asked him what the bigger picture was supposed to be. 2 calendars, 2 futures, 2 versions of him, depending on who was asking. He said, "You're blowing this up because you like drama." That flipped something in me. I yelled that if he wanted less drama, he shouldn't live 2 lives like a coward. He told me to calm down, that I was being emotional and irrational. I told him to stop managing my reactions the same way he managed his secrets, like everything could be smoothed over if he controlled the narrative long enough. He accused me of abandoning responsibility. He said I left him with loose ends, unanswered questions, and stress he didn't deserve. I told him responsibility isn't something you get to demand after betrayal. It's not a service you can invoice once you've been caught. He said I was cruel. I said he was manipulative. He said I was selfish. I said he was dishonest to the bone. He tried to interrupt me. I talked over him. He raised his voice. I raised mine louder. At one point, he actually said, "You're acting unhinged." And I responded without missing a beat that gaslighting doesn't work when the receipts booked a couple's retreat under his name. He hung up on me. I thought that would be it for the day. I was wrong. That night, my phone started lighting up. Messages from his friends, people I hadn't spoken to directly in months, suddenly very invested in my behavior. One told me Nolan was spiraling and that I needed to be the bigger person and come talk to him before he did something stupid. Another said I was punishing him by leaving instead of giving him space to explain. I replied to one of them that babysitting a grown man's lies isn't maturity. It's participation. They didn't like that. Someone else messaged me saying I was cold and vindictive, that I was intentionally destabilizing him by refusing to engage. I told them that refusing to accept a revised version of reality isn't vindictive, it's basic self-respect. They said I was twisting things. I said Nolan twisted them first. Then Nolan switched tactics. He stopped calling and started sending voice notes. Long ones, rambling ones. He talked about stress, about pressure, about how complicated his life had become. He never once said the word sorry. He kept referring to the other woman as a misunderstanding and the trip as poorly timed. He said I was refusing to see nuance. I sent one message back telling him nuance doesn't involve booking getaways with someone you're not supposed to love. That's when the insults escalated. He said I was rigid. He said I was impossible to talk to. He said this was why he'd felt distant lately, because I always needed things your way. I told him that fidelity isn't a personal preference, it's a baseline. He said I was rewriting history. I told him history rewrites itself when people lie. He accused me of enjoying the attention this was getting. I asked him who exactly was getting attention, because all I'd done was leave quietly and exist. He said my silence was performative. I said his secrecy was strategic. Update 2. The calls stopped. The voice notes disappeared. Instead, I started getting emails. Long ones, structured ones, the kind that look like they've been edited, reread, and softened just enough to sound reasonable without actually taking responsibility for anything. The first email opened with, "I've been doing a lot of reflecting." I already knew where it was going. He didn't say affair. He didn't say other relationship. He said an emotional overlap that developed organically over time. He used phrases like misalignment, unmet needs, and communication gaps. He framed everything as if this were a joint project that simply drifted off course, not a deliberate choice he made while lying to my face. Then came the part that really set me off. He said the reason the other relationship gained depth was because I had become emotionally unavailable and difficult to reach. He wrote that I had changed and that he didn't feel safe expressing certain parts of himself with me anymore. I stared at the screen in disbelief. He was rewriting 3 years of shared life into a character flaw I apparently developed to justify him building a second one. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit. Then another email came. Longer, more polished. He talked about timing, pressure, how things got out of hand. He said he never intended to hurt me and that my reaction felt disproportionate to the mistake. That's when I replied. One sentence. I said I didn't abandon him emotionally. I just didn't audition for a role I didn't know existed. That was it. He forwarded my reply to his sister. I know this because she messaged me almost immediately. Her first message called me cold. Her second called me sarcastic. Then she said I always talk down to people and that this was exactly why things went wrong. She told me my tone was cruel and that I enjoyed humiliating her brother when he was already struggling. I told her if her brother felt talked down to, maybe it was because he was lying on the floor. She said that was an awful thing to say about family. I told her what was awful was pretending someone is your partner while planning a future with someone else and expecting applause for self-reflection. She didn't text back. She called. The second I answered, she started yelling. No hello, no pause. She accused me of deliberately trying to destroy his reputation. She said I was taking a private situation and turning it into a public spectacle by refusing to play along with his narrative. She said I was bitter, vindictive, and incapable of forgiveness. I yelled back that his reputation isn't my responsibility and never was. I told her if his image couldn't survive the truth, that wasn't my fault. She told me I was heartless. I told her she was defending deception because it was easier than admitting her brother screwed up. She said I enjoyed being righteous. I said she enjoyed being blind. At one point, she shouted that I was ruining their family's perception of him and that I needed to stop being so dramatic. I snapped back that if their perception of him depended on me staying quiet, then it was built on a lie to begin with. She told me I was vindictive. I said I was honest. She hung up on me. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Later that day, Nolan emailed again. This time the tone was colder. He said forwarding my message to his sister was a mistake, but then immediately followed it by saying my words had consequences and that I should be more mindful of how I spoke to people who cared about it. I replied that if he didn't want his family involved, he shouldn't have involved them. He accused me of escalating things. I told him he escalated the moment he turned my boundary into a family discussion. That night, I started getting passive messages through social media. Nothing direct. Stories posted about loyalty. Quotes about forgiveness. A repost about how hurt people hurt people. I didn't respond. I didn't react, but the pressure was obvious. The message was clear. I was being cast as the villain who refused to soften. Then Nolan tried another angle. He emailed saying he wanted to reset the tone and suggested a calm conversation with a mediator present. He said it would help everyone feel heard. I asked him who everyone was. He didn't answer. Instead, he told me I was making communication impossible by being combative. I told him communication became impossible when honesty left the room. He said I was clinging to anger. I told him he was clinging to control. He said I was punishing him. I said he was minimizing himself into a victim. Update 3. I found out there was more, and it didn't come from digging, spying, or connecting dots. It came from someone else stepping into the mess he created. I got a Facebook message from a woman I didn't recognize. No profile drama, no fake account, normal photos, normal timeline. Her first message was short and unsettlingly polite. She asked if I used to be involved with Nolan. She didn't say how. Before we move on to the next part, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I really want to hear what you think about this story. Was it shocking, crazy, or relatable? And if anything like this has ever happened to you, share your experience in the comments, because we all know stories like these can happen to anyone. She didn't accuse me of anything. Just ask. I said yes. She replied a few minutes later with, "Then I think we need to talk." I stared at that sentence longer than I want to admit. Not because I was scared, but because I already knew what it meant. There's a certain tone people use when they're walking into something that's going to hurt them, and they already feel stupid for not seeing it sooner. She explained that she and Nolan had been seeing each other for months. Not casually. Not, we went on a few dates. Planned time. Scheduled calls. Shared routines. The retreat booking wasn't a surprise getaway. It was something they'd talked about for weeks. And no, she didn't know about me. According to her, I was a former roommate, someone who couldn't move out yet, someone he was helping transition, someone who was inconvenient but temporary. She asked me if that was true. I told her no. I told her we were together the entire time. I told her we were partners, not roommates. I didn't soften it. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't ask her for anything. I just corrected the lie. She went quiet for a bit. Then she said she felt sick. Then she apologized to me, which I didn't ask for, and didn't respond to right away because I didn't know what to say. I wasn't angry at her. I was furious at him. She sent screenshots, not to prove herself, but because she wanted me to know she wasn't exaggerating. I didn't ask for them. She offered. I said okay. They weren't sexual. That somehow made them worse. Inside jokes, pet names, complaints about complicated living situations, him talking about finally having clarity soon, him planning around me like I was furniture. I didn't reply to Nolan immediately. I waited until he reached out first. When he did, it wasn't an apology. It was an accusation. He messaged asking why I was in contact with strangers strangers about his private life. That was his phrasing. Not concern, not confusion. Possession. I called him. The second he answered, he started yelling. Not defensive yelling. Offensive. Loud, sharp, and fast. He accused me of coordinating attacks, of turning people against him, of recruiting someone to humiliate him. I yelled back that I didn't recruit anyone, and that if two women comparing notes ruins his image, that's because his story couldn't survive daylight. He called me manipulative. I told him he was sloppy and arrogant enough to think no one would ever compare timelines. He said I was enjoying this, that I liked watching him get dragged. I snapped and told him I didn't enjoy anything about realizing my entire relationship had been managed like a scheduling problem. I told him the only reason this looked public was because he couldn't keep his lies straight long enough to contain them. He raised his voice and said I was trying to destroy his life. I raised mine right back and told him his life didn't implode because I spoke to someone. It imploded because he built it on overlapping stories and assumed no one would talk. He told me I was bitter and vindictive. I told him bitterness would imply I wanted him back, and vindictive would imply I was doing this on purpose. I said the only thing I was doing was refusing to carry his secrets anymore. He said I'd regret burning bridges. I laughed, not quietly. I laughed into the phone and told him bridges built on lies collapse on their own, and I wasn't standing under them anymore. At some point, we were both yelling at the same time, not trading turns, just noise, accusations overlapping, his voice tight and angry, mine sharp and flat, no tears, no pauses, just venom and volume. He tried to pivot at the end, tried to say this could have been handled privately. I shouted that private handling was his job, and he'd failed at it repeatedly. He hung up. After that, I got messages, not from him, from people adjacent to him. Someone asking why I'd gone nuclear. Someone else saying I should have let him explain in his own time. I responded to one and said his time management was the problem to begin with. I didn't engage after that. Update 4. I woke up to screenshots being sent to me by 3 different people. Nolan had posted one of those vague, carefully worded stories that says nothing and implies everything. Black background, white text, something about learning who really stands by you when things get hard, and outgrowing people who don't respect boundaries. It was vague enough to invite sympathy and specific enough that anyone who knew we'd split knew exactly who he meant. The comments were already rolling in. Heart reactions. You deserve peace. Proud of you. Some people show their true colors. That's what did it. I didn't plan a response. I didn't draft it. I didn't ask anyone's opinion. I tapped reply and wrote one sentence. Lying to 2 women at the same time isn't hardship. That was it. No names, no details, no thread, just that. He deleted the entire story within minutes. Less than 5 minutes after that, my phone lit up. He messaged me furious, calling what I did unhinged and deliberate sabotage. He said I was trying to ruin his image because I couldn't handle being left. I told him he wasn't left, he was caught, and those aren't the same thing. He said I was obsessed with controlling the narrative. I replied that obsession requires interest, and all I felt toward him now was disgust and disbelief that he still thought he was the victim. He accused me of rewriting history for attention. I told him history doesn't need editing when receipts exist and multiple people were living different versions of it at the same time. That's when he called. He was yelling before I even finished saying hello. Loud, fast, panic. He kept repeating that I embarrassed him, that I made him look like a villain, that I knew exactly what I was doing. I yelled back that I didn't make him look like anything, and that if one sentence could undo his image, it wasn't sturdy to begin with. He told me to stop acting superior. I told him to stop acting surprised that consequences exist outside of private conversations. He tried to pivot, said this should have stayed between us. I snapped and said between us stopped applying when he added someone else and lied to both of us. He said I enjoyed humiliating him publicly. I told him humiliation implies innocence and that what he was feeling was exposure, not abuse. He went quiet for a second, then said I was cruel. I raised my voice and said cruel is introducing 2 women to different versions of the same future and expecting silence when the timelines collide. He told me I was burning everything down. I told him he built everything on flammable material and handed me the match the moment he lied. He hung up. A few minutes later, I realized he'd blocked me. That lasted about 2 hours. During that window, I got messages from people I barely knew. Someone asking why I went after him online. Someone else telling me I should have been more classy. I replied to one and said class doesn't require silence when someone lies about you. I ignored the rest. Then the block disappeared and an email came through. Long, formal, cold. Before we move on to the next part, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I really want to hear what you think about this story. Was it shocking, crazy, or relatable? And if anything like this has ever happened to you, share your experience in the comments, because we all know stories like these can happen to anyone. He wrote about how disappointed he was in my behavior, how I'd crossed a line by responding publicly, how my actions proved I was emotionally reactive. He said I was damaging any chance of amicable resolution. I read it twice. Then I replied with 3 sentences. I told him I didn't know him image management. I told him I didn't agree to protect lies I didn't create. I told him if he wanted privacy, he should have practiced honesty when it still mattered. He responded almost immediately, angrier than before, accusing me of refusing accountability. I shot back that accountability isn't something you demand from the person you deceive. After that, the messages slowed, but the tension didn't. Update 5. He asked to meet. It came through as a calm, neutral message, like we were co-workers wrapping up a project. He said he wanted closure. He said he didn't want things to end like this. He said we owed it to each other to talk face to face. I replied that closure isn't something you demand from someone you betrayed, and that I wasn't interested. He showed up anyway. I won't say where. I won't say how he knew I'd be there. All I'll say is that I saw him before he saw me, and the look on his face wasn't remorse. It was determination, like he'd decided this conversation was happening whether I consented to it or not. He walked up and immediately started talking, like momentum alone would carry him through. He said he was tired of being treated like a villain. He said the silence was cruel. He said dragging things out by refusing to forgive him was emotional punishment. That's when I told him forgiveness isn't a refund you get for apologizing badly. He scoffed and said I was being dramatic, that people make mistakes, that I was acting like he committed some unforgivable crime. I said people make mistakes, yes, but he built a routine around deception and called it a misunderstanding. He raised his voice first. He said I was punishing him on purpose. He said I enjoyed watching him suffer. He said I was withholding closure as leverage. I raised my voice back and told him consequences aren't punishment, they're aftermath, and that he doesn't get to dictate how fast reality hits just because it's uncomfortable. He accused me of dragging his name through the mud. I said his name walked there on its own. He said I should have protected him because we had history. I told him history doesn't turn lies into obligations. At some point he snapped and said, "Do you know how hard it is to admit you screwed up and still get treated like this?" I shot back, louder. "Do you know how hard it is to find out your entire relationship was scheduled around someone else's availability?" People nearby started looking. He noticed and lowered his voice, then hissed that I was embarrassing him again. I told him he was the only one embarrassed, and that embarrassment wasn't my responsibility. That's when he went for me personally. He said no one else would put up with my standards. He said I was rigid, unforgiving, impossible to please. He said this was why things drifted in the first place, because I expected too much and didn't offer enough grace. I didn't hesitate. I said at least my standards don't require deception to function. I said at least I don't need parallel lives to feel wanted. He called me cold. I called him dishonest. He said I was heartless. I said he was reckless with other people's lives and wanted applause for finally admitting it. He told me I was throwing away something good. I laughed and said something good doesn't require a cover story. Update 6. Mutual acquaintances, people I barely interacted with on a weekly basis, started messaging me. Some on Instagram, some via Snapchat, even Facebook DMs. They all had the same tone, concern disguised as judgment. "Maybe you should move on quietly," one said. "Stop being so harsh," another wrote. The subtext was loud and ugly. He was spinning the narrative, and now my private life was public commentary fodder. I replied to one of them bluntly, "Quiet compliance is how liars stay comfortable." That was the beginning. By midweek, Nolan himself reached out, accusing me of poisoning people against him. I told him people don't need poison when they're handed the truth. He didn't like it. He called me unforgiving, cold, unreasonable. I told him he was dishonest, and that dishonesty doesn't earn sympathy, no matter how loudly you protest. He then started sending long WhatsApp messages, one after the other, the texts coming in faster than I could read. Every paragraph accused me of being manipulative, emotionally vengeful, and cruel. He said I was humiliating him, that I was publicly shaming him for private mistakes. I typed a reply and sent it, and it was sharp. Publicly shaming him? No. Publicly exposing the person who built 2 lives and hid one from me. The messages weren't enough. He started calling me nonstop. My phone rang for hours. When I didn't answer, he switched to voice notes. Then his friends started contacting me again, some pleading, some scolding, some trying to guilt me into forgiving him. One of them even said, "You're making him out to be a monster." I replied, "He earned that depiction himself." He called me cold. I called him reckless. He said I was vindictive. I said I was honest. I got a Snapchat from a mutual friend telling me that Nolan feels attacked and that I was blowing things way out of proportion. I sent back, "He built a relationship around deception, and somehow you think I'm the problem?" By the end of the week, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Every ping was another accusation, another attempt at persuasion, another insult dressed up as concern. I ignored most of them, but one message slipped through. Nolan's sister had made a group chat with 3 friends I didn't know, and they were all talking about how I was cruel, heartless, and over overreacting. I typed a long, furious response in the chat, saying that cruelty is pretending someone is your partner while scheduling a future with another person. I hit send, and the notifications exploded. He called me during it. He yelled. I yelled back. He said I was tearing apart the social fabric around him. I yelled that the only fabric being torn was the web of lies he'd spun, and that he could deal with the consequences himself. Update 7. It started quietly. Not a call, not a single direct message, just a group text that landed like a grenade. Nolan and his sister, together, typing out what they clearly thought was a final, measured verdict. Disappointed was the first word. Then came the usual phrasing meant to sound mature, calm, above the fray, choosing peace over conflict. No acknowledgement of what they'd done, no recognition of the months of lies, no trace of accountability, just dismissal disguised as morality. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to dismantle every carefully chosen word. Eventually, I typed, "Peace built on denial isn't peace. It's avoidance." I hit send. Silence followed. Not a pause for thought. Not a single reply. Just nothing. The next day, my notifications didn't explode. People didn't call. There was no dramatic confrontation, no flurry of accusations. Just a slow fade. Friends who had messaged me during the previous weeks either stopped reaching out or deleted their messages before I could respond. Their concern, their pressure, their attempts at control evaporated quietly, but the tension lingered. It hung in the corners of every platform. Every time I opened Instagram, I could see Nolan's vague stories lurking at the top, smiling faces, neutral captions, hearts from mutual friends. A single image, carefully ambiguous. No context, nothing overt, just the implication of all is well, a challenge wrapped in normalcy. I replied publicly once more, on a thread where one of his friends had commented, "Just move on, be kind, don't make waves." I wrote back, slow and deliberate. Kindness isn't participation in deception. Waves happen when someone builds their life on lies and expects silence. It didn't get a reply. It got ignored, which, in a way, felt like victory. Or maybe it felt like emptiness. Then came the indirect messages, posts, subtle comments, indirect accusations posted where I would see them, meant to provoke. One friend tagged me in a story about loyalty and honesty. I responded publicly, calling out the hypocrisy of praising loyalty while excusing deliberate deception. A small argument thread formed. People weighed in. I yelled in texts to some, pointed out lies to others, challenged anyone who insulted me with logic and fury. Some argued back, saying I was cruel, sarcastic, obsessive. I typed back that cruelty was hiding in plain sight, that obsession requires emotional attachment, and all I felt was disgust for lies and manipulation. Nolan messaged me again that night. He was furious, accusing me of ruining his reputation, of rallying the wrong people against him. I told him his reputation was a consequence of his own choices. He accused me of being cold. I told him dishonesty doesn't deserve warmth. He called me unforgiving. I told him that unforgiveness is not the problem. His lies are. The conversation escalated into yelling, voice notes, FaceTime attempts, frantic texts in rapid succession. I yelled back at him every time he tried to dominate the narrative. He tried to twist words, tried to bait me into guilt, tried to make me question myself. I refused. I insulted him back, cutting through every manipulative line. Coward, liar, actor, fraud. He called me vindictive. I called him exposed. By midweek, even his sister had sent me a message. She attempted to defend him, tried to reframe the story, accused me of destroying family harmony and being cruel. I told her truth isn't cruelty, deception is. I told her that pretending someone's life is one thing while planning another is not just lying. It's dangerous, and I would not apologize for surviving. She hung up. I sent a message in the group chat she had started weeks ago, dismantling her accusations one by one. She didn't reply, and then, slowly, the noise stopped. Not with a bang, not with confrontation, just a slow unraveling. My phone stopped vibrating. My inbox cleared. Friends stopped messaging. Social media interactions fell silent. The fight had moved outward, spun itself through networks, but now it stalled. It didn't feel resolved. It didn't feel clean. It was jagged, unfinished, sharp edges and loose threads everywhere. Every notification-free hour felt heavy, like the air was holding a breath it had forgotten to release. I looked at the empty notifications, the quiet feeds, the lack of replies, and realized that endings don't always have fireworks. Some endings just exist, jagged, unfinished, tense in their stillness. I didn't respond again. I didn't block or mute. I just let the silence exist. Let them stew in it. Let the story linger unresolved. The end Nolan didn't cheat once. He built a full secret relationship, mystery packages, alias bookings, couples retreat planned, while pretending everything was work stuff. When caught via his own sloppy email, he didn't apologize. He gaslit, misinterpreted logistics, emotional overlap, blamed your unavailability, called exposure unhinged. His squad piled on, friends calling you dramatic for leaving, sister yelling you're cruel for not letting him explain, vague pity posts painting him as the victim. You held the line, clapped back with truth, refused his closure ambush, and let his lies collapse under their own weight. AITA, you didn't overreact. You reacted to deliberate, sustained deception. Walking away from a liar who wants you to swallow his rewrite isn't harsh. It's self-preservation. He lost control of the narrative, not you. Enjoy the silence. He finally ran out of scripts. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.